So React components, let's move on. Let's understand what do you mean by a component. I've already told you a component is nothing but a function. So when you talk about React components, there are actually they are actually nothing but reusable pieces of code, because we have written a function. We know we write it for reusing it, right? So it's reusable pieces of code. But there are two types of React components. One is a function component which we have created. We know how to create function components now. The another one is class component. So we also have objects, classes in JavaScript. We're not going to focus on objects and classes. We'll focus on function components. But when you take a look at the meaning of a function component, it is JavaScript that is returning JSX. JSX is nothing but HTML, that is an extension for JavaScript. It's an HTML extension for JavaScript. They call that JavaScript XML. Nothing to worry, it's just HTML. Let's see a very simple example for a function component. What is that we are going to focus on? Function components. Let's see a very simple example for a function component. We know how to write function. We create a file, we write the function. Inside this, you'll have a return statement, and this will return HTML code. We can call it JSX. So there are certain differences between HTML and JSX. We'll see that. So this will return. So when I call this function, what will happen is it will return welcome to React as an HTML code, and we'll also export that specific component. From now on, I'll not call it as a function. I'll call it as a component. What is a function component? Which returns JSX, and it can be reused. Can we write this small function component? So what is that you have to do is go to your folder. You can add a file. It can be any file. Say I have given welcome message. Actually, it should be say I have already created a file called display course. Oh God, where is this display course.js? Let me delete this. So I have this file by name display course.js, and inside this I'll create this function. What is this? Display course. This is a component. What it will do? It will return JSX. So you type return to parenthesis. Within this, you should put your HTML code, whatever you want here. Say this is from display course. Okay. What is very important? You should export this. Export default display course. No need to give any parenthesis. Save this. Are you all clear with this? Next, what you have to do is you have to import this display course in our index.js file. Let's go to index.js. Let's import it. How will you import? Import whatever your file name is from that specific JS file. So this is an index.js. So index.js takes care of getting that division with the ID root. And next, what we are going to do inside root.render is we'll just call our component name. So you call this component name display course. Save it. So the compilation will happen, and then you'll see the output. The development server will give you the latest version of your index.html. So this is that change we have done. Instead of app, now we are calling index dot what is that display course component. Are you all clear with writing a simple component? So you code a function. This component returns JSX, and you export that component inside your index.js. Import that component, and just inside render you render by calling the component name. I will execute this. If I give display course, this will be the output. If I give app, what will be the output? It's going to just display this thing, because app.js will be writing that content. If I call display course, what will be happen? If I call display course, what will happen? This will be the output. React DOM. You are just using React DOM dot create root. See, there is this thing called React DOM. What is the use of this is, I told you there are two types of DOM. One is the virtual DOM, another one is the actual DOM. Earlier we have seen some exercises. If I should add an H1 element to a web page, what are the things I have to do? What are the methods I have to call? Create an H1 element and add it to the web page. How will I add it using plain JavaScript? How will you add an H1 element to a web page using JavaScript? It's a very difficult question. Create node, create text node, append child, all these things we are doing, right? Right now you are seeing the same thing is being performed here. We are just adding an H1 tag to the web page, but there is some person in between. So we have this virtual DOM and then the actual DOM, right? So we are writing code like this. Here we don't have any function like create node, create text node, append child. So there's someone who is taking this code, converting it into your actual JavaScript code so that the actual DOM can be manipulated. So that person is this particular code we are seeing here. React DOM takes care of all those things. Taking care of your React component, converting it into JavaScript code that will be actually impacting the actual DOM. Or else how will you add an H1 element to your web page? You should be calling create text node, append child, create node, all these things. The output is the same, but internally we are using components and then we are converting that into the actual DOM output. Okay. Why we went into components? Reuse. That is the main factor. So whenever I need this is from display course, I just call this component, write it to any web page. You understood this concept? So let's take a look at some more properties of JSX. That is, we'll move on to JSX. What is JSX? HTML-like structures within your JavaScript code. Nothing to be afraid of, is just HTML with some changes. And you can embed variables, expressions, function calls within your JSX code. This is the difference. Let's see how to embed some expressions. Say I can say this is JSX. I can have an expression embedded in my HTML code like this. Let's try this. Let's go to this file. I'll create and add an expression here. What is this? 3 star 3. Now when I save this, the output will be this is from display course 9. So you can have some expressions. You can pass some variables. You can call some functions. So everything can be performed within JSX. We can also perform let x equals 2, let y equals 3, and here we can give x star y 6. All these things are possible. So you can also go with some if else statements. Say I have x equals 2 here. If x double equals 2, what I will perform here is I'll have one more variable, let m, and what I will perform here is I'll just give m to be some value 24 or so, something like that. So we have some simple if else statements here, nothing much. We have already learned this. M is equal to 27. Now I can just propagate the value of m here. What will be m here? M will be 24. Because when x double equals 2, m is assigned 24, we are just mapping that value of m here. So you can have variables, expressions, function calls within your JSX code. Are you all clear with this? Did you practice this? See, there is one important thing that you have to note down while you're working with JSX. This is a very important thing. Like I have an H1 element here. This is from display course, one H1 element here. If I'm going to have another H1 element, this is from display course again. See, this is a very important issue. When I have two H1 elements being returned from my component, what happens here is error. Why that is happening is when you have multiple HTML elements getting written, you should have a parent level element. Top level element is mandatory. So I can very well enclose this inside a div. So this is important, or else you're going to get an error. So when I return multiple elements, you should enclose that within a top level element. So when I enclose it, you see now it's working. Very simple concept, but if you're a beginner in React, higher chances of getting stuck here. Then what is the error? It's just a top level element. This top level element can also be a fragment. It's fragment. So it can be empty, but there should be a top level element like this. Only then it will work. Can you write a list of items to the web page? How will you create an unordered list? It's very simple. So li, okay, here like that we have some items. Save it. That's it. We are just writing a web page using a component. That's about. Think about JSX. These are the things. Writing multiple lines we have seen. Only thing is you should have a parent level element when you are writing multiple HTML elements out, or else you are going to get an error. Can I move forward? See, there is also one more extension which I have installed. You can also use it if you're working in your laptops. Like, say, I go to a file, testfile.js. Here, if I want to create a function component, I have this extension which I have installed. It just creates it's not code runner. ES7 React Redux GraphQL React Native snippets. This extension you can install in VS Code. What is the use of this extension is when I type RAFC, it creates the entire code stuff for the component. So what is the component here? Test file, and I can return some HTML elements here. This is a heading from RAFC I'll put. See, automatically the export statement comes in. It's an arrow function. So this snippet, when you include that, it makes coding fast. So if I want to use this component in my index, what should I do? Import test from testfile.js, and then I should render that component. Are you clear with this? So if you want, you can install this and use it. It's very easy. What is that you're going to give? RAFC, and everything gets added for you. But as a beginner, we'll code. What next we have? The next thing we are going to do is we are going to add some styling. Say we can add CSS to our web page, right? How to add that is we use class name. In CSS, we call something, we used class. What is the use of class attribute? We give a class name and use it. Here you can't use class, we have to use class name instead of class. Let's go to our component that we have created. What is that component? Display course. And then we can give some class name. Say this h1 class name some c. So we'll be using the class name to style that specific component. So where we can add these style sheets, you can create another file. Let's say you go to this place, add another file. You call that display course.css. And inside this file, you access that class name. It's just like how you access the class in CSS, right? .c, and then you can give some text color to be red, something like this. Now this is display course.css. This is display course.js. How will I use the display course.css here? Import display. What is the issue here? Why is that I'm not getting anything here? So we go index.js. So import index.css, we'll copy that here. We have to import this file. What is this file here? That is display course.css. Okay. Are you able to see the styling? So what is that we have done here? Let me explain it again. See, if I want to style any specific HTML element inside my component, I will be using the keyword class name. See, with respect to HTML directly, what we used to do, we used to give a class like this. Here we can't use that, we have to use a class name. And you just give some class name here. It can be any of your names. And then how to style this? For this, you take a new file, you name it as display course.css file. And inside this, you access this class using .c. How you access an ID? Hash something. A class will be .c, and then you give the property. The final thing is you should import that. Import display course.css. Once when you import it and you compile it, you see the styling will come into effect. So for every component, if you're going to have styling, you put that in a separate file. That's a standard. See, app.js got an app.css file, index.js has an index.css file. So your component will also have a .css file. In case you are very lazy, you want to perform some inline styling, which we normally don't recommend, we can go with style. And this is the weird thing. You have to give parenthesis twice, and then we have to say color to be something like blue. So what we have done here is inline styling. First one is using the file. This one is using the inline style. But only thing is you should give it, say 2 times you have to give the flower brackets here. That's how it is. If you don't give it, you're not going to get the style. So these are the maybe the basic differences between your actual HTML and JSX. Seeing here. So please practice these things. See, you can also use ID. When you talk about styling, I can also use ID here. Like what you do in normal HTML files, you can give an ID C1. So ID can be used. Likewise, I can also have, say, if I have input type to be text, say input type, I have an input type text box, something like this. When you're creating this kind of an element, you can give all these things. You can give a class name, say C1, you can have an ID. Normally, when you create any form, what you do? ID can be C2, something like this. You give a name attribute, right? Name can be username. I'm just giving an example. And what else you have here? Name, value. For some HTML elements, you also have value, which you can give, like radio options, checkboxes, which you can give. And you can also make this required. So all these things you can perform. Whether there'll be any errors or anything like that, but you see there's a text box here. So you can add anything, but you should also follow these things. You can give an ID, class name to access the value. You can give a name field, you can give a username. For some options, you can also have this value. Okay. Let's move forward. What else we have? So this is your exercise now. Create a form using JSX as shown below. You write a component which will return this form. So even before going into that final exercise, don't know, like a lot of things to complete. Inline styling we have done. There's one more thing I want to complete, that is component within components. So what do you mean by component within component? You can call a function within another function, right? A series of nested function calls that can happen here. So here I have this function first, which will return welcome to my registration form. And there is another function or component which will write my form out. but the first component which I am calling is first. So this is like, this will run first and type this message to the screen. Next, my form will be given. So I can have multiple components nested within each other. Finally, in index.js, when I call first tab, the output will be welcome to the registration form from one component and this actual form from another component. So this is nesting within components. Let's try this. Let's quickly try this. For this, what will I carry on is, I'll take up this display course itself. What will I return here is, say, I'll have this file prp.js, or what is this, first.js. I'll have this file first.js. So inside first.js, I'll write this function. What is this function I'm going to write is return we'll have this h1 element, that is simple h1 element here. Welcome to VIT University, something like that. And what we should never forget, export default and then the component name. So this is the first message. And when I go to display course, I'll have this display course, that is, this is a course on cyber security. And I want this welcome message, welcome from VIT University, that is written by this component. So what I can do is, inside this display course.js, I should do a simple import. Import the file name is first from first.js. I mean the component name is first from first.js, and what is that I should do here is, I should first call this component. See, when you're calling the component, when you're rendering the component, what is that is important is, this top level element is actually needed. We have multiple statements here. So how will you call that component is, you just use that slash, that's it. And now when I go to the output, what will be the output? In index.js, I am calling display course. So display course.js will in turn use first.js and then it will print this message. So when I go to my output, welcome to VIT University, this is a course on cyber security. So you can have various components within a component. It's just a function call within another function call. If I want to reuse this component for various courses, this is only for cyber security. For Java, how will I do that? For JavaScript, how will I do that? So now there is a concept called passing arguments, passing parameters to functions. So we can use that. Say, instead of saying this to be very rigidly cyber security, I can get some course input, course name as input. And then what is that we are going to do here is, we are going to pass that. This is where JSX helps us. So what is it we are going to do here is, we will say course input dot course. What is this course? That is the next thing. Course input is what we are getting in. What is this course is, actually, you go to your index.js, wherever I am calling this display course, I can very well say course. This is what I am going to pass. Say Java. I'll say Java. What is that? So what is the parameter I am passing as course to be Java? And inside my display course, what is that I'm getting here? I'm getting it as course input, the argument. I'm passing that argument as course input dot course. This course is nothing but what we are passing here. So what will be the output if I save this? Oh, this is not. Why it's not working? Maybe I was shocked, but it took some time. So this course is on Java. You see, you can use the same component for various courses now. If I want to use that component for cyber security, what is that I have to do? Just call this index.js. You just pass cyber security. The same component can be used for various inputs now. So what is that you call this? When you're passing some parameters, what is that you call that in React is, we call that props. Props or properties. So what is the property I'm passing here? This is the property, and how is that I'm receiving it here? Like this. So like that, you can pass objects, you can pass variables, you can pass arrays. So you can pass anything that can be taken by your component and rendered for you. So in the next class, we'll be looking at certain concepts like props validation. We'll also see how to pass arrays, objects, variables. Next, props validation in the sense, what is that I am passing here is a string. So I can check whatever input that's coming in here is a string, or else I can generate some warnings. So it's validating the kind of data you're getting in here. So that is props validation. We'll see that in the next class, properties and properties validation. But what do you mean by properties? Passing data to your functions or components in React.